My name is Martha Wright, and I was 29 years old. When I realized that love, when stretched too far in one direction, doesn't break loudly, it goes cold. The funny thing about red flags is that they rarely wave the way you expect them to. They don't scream. They don't announce themselves. Most of the time they look like compromise, like patience, like being understanding. For 3 years with Patrick, I mistook endurance for devotion. I saw the flags, sure, but I told myself they were just decorations fluttering in the wind of a complicated relationship. I polished the poles. I admired the colors. I convinced myself that love meant learning to squint. The Thursday before the party was my final act of polishing. I had picked up 4 consecutive weekend shifts at the warehouse, back-aching, monotonous work that paid time and a half. The extra money wasn't for me. It wasn't for a vacation or something frivolous. It was to cover Patrick's half of the rent for 2 months while he figured things out and chased the influencer dream he swore was just one collaboration away from taking off. I didn't mind. Or at least I told myself I didn't. You build a runway for the person you love. You believe they'll eventually take off. That afternoon, he had his friends over for pre-party planning. His ex-girlfriend, Madison, now rebranded as a creative consultant, and Lena, who somehow funded her lifestyle through vague brand partnerships and perpetual confidence, treated our apartment like a lounge they occasionally tolerated. I spent my day off cleaning, scrubbing, vacuuming the rug, Patrick said, trapped bad energy, arranging the expensive cheese plate he'd requested from the overpriced market down the street. They arrived in a cloud of perfume and loud gossip. I got a distracted hey before they made a beeline for the wine. "Babe, we need privacy for the creative flow," Patrick said, steering me gently toward the bedroom with a kiss on my cheek that felt more like a dismissal. "You don't mind, right?" I minded the way Madison's eyes scanned our living room, cataloging imperfections. I minded how Lena immediately put her feet on the coffee table I'd refinished myself. But I smiled anyway. I always did. "No problem," I said. "I'll be in here." From behind the closed door, I listened to the laughter, the outfit critiques, the casual cruelty they reserved for people who weren't in the room. Patrick's voice was the loudest, confident, performative, elevated, a version of him I rarely saw when it was just the two of us. When they finally left, the apartment looked like a quiet aftermath. Lipstick-stained wine glasses, crumbs crushed into the rug, the cheese plate reduced to rind and neglect. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just silence and mess for me to absorb. Saturday came faster than I expected. Patrick buzzed with anticipation all day. When he emerged from the bedroom, he was wearing an outfit I'd never seen before, tailored, expensive, effortlessly curated. His hair was perfect in a way it never was for me. He looked elevated. "You look amazing," I said, and meant it even though the words felt small. "Madison helped me pick it out," he replied, already scrolling through his phone. "Golden hour photos are key. We can't be late." The ride over was conducted almost entirely in the glow of his screen. A group chat called Solar Squad kept pinging. "Lena, is Martha driving you?" "Patrick." "Yeah, Madison." "Her car kind of kills the vibe, but Uber surge is insane." "Lena." "Just have her drop you around the corner. We'll be on the roof." I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the steering wheel. My car, the reliable, unglamorous thing that never once failed me, had apparently become shorthand for everything about me that didn't fit his world. We entered the trendy part of town. Music pulsed through open doors. People spilled onto sidewalks dressed like they belonged somewhere else. Patrick finally looked up. "Okay," he said, pointing ahead casually. "Just up here. Let me out a block away. I don't want to be seen getting out of your car." The words didn't land like an insult. They landed like a procedure. Efficient, practiced, as if this had always been the plan. A cold clarity spread through me, starting in my chest and moving outward. It wasn't anger, it was recognition. I didn't argue, I didn't ask him to explain. I signaled pulled over immediately. Not a block away, but right there, and put the car in park. "What are you doing?" he asked, confused. I said a block up. I turned and looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd supported, financed, softened myself into something smaller for. "Get out," I said. He blinked, then laughed. "Oh my God, don't be dramatic. It's not a big deal." He grabbed his phone, opened the door, and stepped out without another glance. I watched him walk away in the mirror, already typing, already entering the version of his life where I was invisible. I sat there for a full minute before pulling back into traffic. The thought was simple, clear, final. I'm done. The drive home felt unreal in the way moments after an accident feel unreal. Too quiet, too sharp. Every detail, suddenly exaggerated. The streetlights blurred past my windshield, and for the first time in months, the silence in my car didn't feel like something I needed to fill. It wasn't tense. It wasn't waiting. It was settled. Final. I realized something as I drove. I wasn't replaying his words. I wasn't wondering if I'd misunderstood. The clarity that had settled in my chest was glacial and immovable. Asking to be dropped off a block away wasn't a mistake. It wasn't nerves. It was a decision he'd rehearsed long before he said it out loud. I was an inconvenience to be edited out of the frame. I parked in my usual spot beneath our apartment. The living room light was still on the one I'd left on out of habit, a quiet signal meant to say, "I'm here." I sat in the car for a moment longer, hands resting loosely on the wheel, and watched that warm square of light like it belonged to someone else. Then calmly, I turned it off in my mind. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of perfume and wine. A single glass sat in the sink. Glitter dusted the hallway floor, catching the light like evidence of a life that had gone on without me. I stepped over it. I didn't start packing in anger. I didn't cry. I started with socks. There's something deeply grounding about doing things methodically when your emotional world has just collapsed. I pulled my old gym duffel from the back of the closet, then the 2 suitcases from the top shelf. I packed like a surgeon, removing something foreign, precise, careful, unemotional. Only my things. Only what belonged to me. My books from the nightstand. The framed photo of my parents and me at the lake, the one Patrick once called sweet, but kind of small town. My toolbox. I left the espresso machine he'd begged for and never learned to use. I took the chipped ceramic mug my younger sister made me in middle school. It fit perfectly in the side pocket of the duffel. The closet was the starkest line of truth. My half was simple, functional. T-shirts, jeans, a few dresses I wore to work. His side exploded with fabrics, colors, outfits bought for versions of himself he was still auditioning for. I emptied my side completely, left every hanger. In the bathroom, I scooped my razor, my shampoo, my toothbrush into a bag. I left behind the shelves crowded with serums and masks he'd insisted were investments. The apartment began to echo as I moved through it, each room sounding more hollow than the last. The note came last. I stood at the kitchen counter, the same place I'd arranged that ridiculous cheese plate, and stared at a blank sheet of paper. I didn't want to explain myself. I didn't want to argue with someone who had already made their choice. You don't negotiate with clarity. You state the consequence. I wrote 5 words. Hope your friends give you better rides. No signature. My name would have implied connection, and that was already gone. I placed the note on the kitchen island where he'd see it immediately, then did one final walkthrough. The living room where I'd listened to laughter through closed doors. The bedroom now divided cleanly in half. The hallway where glitter still sparkled like a mockery. It didn't feel like leaving home. It felt like exiting a museum exhibit about a life I'd mistaken for my own. I loaded my car. It sat lower, weighed down by suitcases and certainty. The same car he'd been ashamed of an hour earlier now felt like the only thing that had never asked me to shrink. I removed my apartment key from the ring, locked the door from the inside, and slid the key under the mat. For a moment, a very small, very quiet moment, the old voice whispered that this was extreme, that adults talk, that relationships deserve conversations. But the conversation had already happened. It just hadn't used words. I drove to a 24-hour diner on the other side of the city, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and found a furnished sublet online. Overpriced. Beige. Available immediately. I paid the deposit with money from the fund I'd built to cover Patrick's rent. The irony was so clean, it almost made me smile. By 3:00 a.m., I was alone in a box of an apartment with my suitcases lined against the wall. I set my chipped mug on the counter like a flag. I texted my supervisor that I was available for extra shifts. Then I turned my phone off. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. When I turned my phone back on, the next morning, it buzzed immediately, vibrating against the cheap laminate counter like it was trying to crawl away from itself. I didn't touch it right away. I made coffee first, burnt, watery diner-style coffee that tasted like being awake on purpose. I stood by the narrow window of the sublet, looking out at a street I didn't recognize, and waited for my breathing to even out. Only then did I look. The messages formed a clean arc of emotion each time, stamp a marker of Patrick's night unraveling without me. The first text came just before 2 in the morning. Still out. Party's insane. Madison knows someone who works at a magazine, remind me to tell you. A photo followed. Him on a rooftop arm slung around Lena's shoulders, lights glittering behind them. He looked victorious, untouchable. I felt nothing. I swiped it away. At 3:18 a.m., a missed call. No voicemail. At 6:07 a.m., another call. This time, a voicemail notification blinked insistently. I plugged in my earbuds, took a sip of coffee, and pressed play. His voice started light, slurred, pleased with itself. Hey, Ev. Just got home. Uber was like $80. Can you believe that? Pause keys jangling. Are you out getting breakfast? That's sweet. The sound shifted. Confusion crept in, thin at first. Why is your side of the closet empty? Drawers opened, closed. Opened again faster this time. Okay, not funny. Where's your stuff? His breathing changed, sharper. Martha, call me back. This isn't funny. Then panic raw and unfiltered. Please, what is going on? The message ended abruptly. I deleted it. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again, an unfamiliar local number. I watched it vibrate itself into silence. 2 minutes passed. It rang again. On the third attempt, I answered. I didn't say anything. Martha, he said, breathless, stripped of the smooth confidence he wore like armor. Finally. What the hell is happening? Where are you? I'm gone, I said calmly. The note explains it. The note? His voice spiked. That stupid note, hope your friends give you better rides. Are you serious right now? You're doing all this because of last night. You asked not to be seen with me, I replied. I respected that. There was a sharp laugh on his end, defensive brittle. It was a joke. You're taking this way too far. God, you're so sensitive. You weren't joking in the group chat, I said evenly. You were leading it. Silence. I didn't need confirmation. The absence of denial was louder than any apology. So that's it, he whispered. Finally, anger replacing fear. 3 years, and you disappear in the night over a stupid comment. That's cowardly. A real woman would have talked to me. The words slid off me like rain off glass. A real partner doesn't make herself smaller so someone else can feel bigger, I said. Don't call this number again. I hung up, then I blocked him. The quiet that followed felt surgical, like something unhealthy had finally been removed. I sat back on the edge of the bed and let my shoulders drop. For the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. The email started 2 days later. The first subject line read, I'm sorry, Martha. He wrote about humiliation, about reflection, about how he'd lost sight of what mattered. He said he loved me. He asked me to come home so we could talk like adults. I archived it. A week later, another email arrived. I can't afford the apartment on my own. This one was longer, messier. He explained that the landlord was threatening to break the lease, that Madison had let him crash on her couch for a bit, but it was awkward, that Lena joked about him losing his driver. He said it wasn't fair that one comment could destroy everything we'd built. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Regret had curdled into accusation. I archived that one too. Social media came next. A follow request from an account with a blurry beach photo and a name that meant nothing. I declined it. Blocked it. An hour later, a DM from a blank profile slipped through. Running away doesn't make you strong. It makes you heartless. Blocked. The last voicemail came on a Saturday morning from yet another new number. I didn't delete this one right away. I listened. He sounded wrecked, hoarse, stripped of performance. They're not my friends, he said, voice cracking. Madison says I'm bad energy now. Lena asked me to pay her back for drinks. They say I'm dragging down the vibe. A long pause, traffic in the background. He wasn't home. I tried seeing someone else, he continued quietly, just to move on. She ghosted me, told people I was clingy. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm staying at my sister's. She's mad. I have no money. I don't know who I am without you. I listened once. Then I deleted it. What he was experiencing wasn't tragedy. It was consequence, clean, logical, unavoidable. He had chosen appearance over substance, and now he was holding the empty costume. I set my phone down and opened my laptop. There were shifts to pick up, a life to build. The silence around me didn't echo anymore. It held. 6 months is a deceptively short amount of time when you're waiting for something to break, and an enormous one when you're quietly building something new. The beige sublet became temporary in the way all transitional spaces should be. I worked more than I ever had extra shift, turning into trust, turning into responsibility. The warehouse stopped feeling like a place I was stuck and started feeling like a place that responded when I showed up fully. I became a shift lead. Then, not long after, a supervisor. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. The kind of solid I hadn't had in years. I moved into a one-bedroom overlooking the river. It wasn't big, but it was clean, modern, and entirely mine. Every object inside it had been chosen by me, for me. No aesthetic compromises. No invisible negotiations. The chipped mug lived on the counter like a quiet victory. Patrick faded into the background noise of my life until he didn't. The first sign of his real collapse came through a mutual acquaintance at work. Someone who knew him through Lena mentioned casually that Patrick had kind of disappeared, that he wasn't getting invited places anymore, that Madison had stopped returning his calls. I didn't ask questions. The second sign came in the form of an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was empty. "I know you blocked me," it read. "I just need you to know that losing you made me realize how much I took for granted." He wrote about therapy, about insecurity, about how he'd been chasing approval from people who never cared about him. He said he was trying to become better. I read it once, then I archived it. What he didn't understand, what people like him never understand, is that growth doesn't entitle you to forgiveness. Becoming aware of your damage doesn't undo it. I wasn't his finish line. I wasn't a reward waiting for him to level up. I was already gone. The rumors continued anyway. Madison had moved on to a new Circle One with actual money and less patience. Lena had posted something vague about cutting off emotional leeches. Patrick's name never appeared, but the implication was obvious. His ex-girlfriend, Madison, the same one who'd once helped him curate an image I'd financed, had resurfaced briefly in his orbit. Not romantically, transactionally. I heard she offered him guidance in exchange for favors he could no longer afford. It was the first time I felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy, not revenge, just the quiet validation of seeing reality assert itself. Then came the invitation. My cousin's wedding, a botanical garden across town, late summer. I almost didn't go. Patrick had always found family events boring. I'd learned without realizing it to shrink my world to fit his preferences. I bought a charcoal dress that fit me properly. Not trend-driven, not curated, just elegant. Just me. The garden glowed with soft lights and laughter. People talked to me without scanning the room for someone better. They listened. They asked questions and waited for answers. It felt like stepping into a parallel universe, one where I had always belonged. I was waiting at the bar when I saw him. Patrick stood near the restrooms, hovering at the edge of the reception like a guest who wasn't quite sure he'd been invited. His suit didn't fit the way it used to. His posture was different, collapsed inward like someone trying not to be noticed. He saw me. I watched the recognition ripple across his face. Shock first, then hope, reflexive, desperate, and finally devastation as he took in the whole picture. The way I stood, the calm, the absence of weight he used to put on my shoulders. Madison was with him. She followed his gaze, saw me, smirked, and walked away without a word. He waited, gathered himself. Then approached like someone stepping onto thin ice. "Martha," he said softly, "you look incredible." "Thank you," I replied politely. "It's a beautiful wedding." Silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. "I've been in therapy," he blurted. "I know what I did was awful. That night it wasn't me." I took a slow sip of my drink and finally looked at him fully. Not through him, at him. I saw regret, exhaustion, the desperate need for absolution. "I know," I said. "It was you. All of you. I just stopped pretending otherwise." His face crumpled. "Can we talk sometime?" he asked. "Just coffee. I need closure." At that moment, Daniel found me. He slipped his hand into mine naturally, without hesitation. Warm, steady, real. "There you are," he said, smiling. "They're about to start the speeches." Patrick stared at our joined hands, the realization draining the last of his hope. "There's nothing to close," I said gently. "My life is full. I hope you find peace, but you'll have to find it somewhere else." I turned away with Daniel, the music swelling behind us. I didn't look back. Some roads don't need to be revisited to be understood. If I'm being honest, the most surprising part of the months that followed wasn't how much my life improved. It was how little I thought about Patrick while it did. Healing. I learned isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic breakthroughs or cinematic montages. It happens quietly in the background while you're busy doing other things, while you're learning new routines, while you're sleeping through the night without waking up to check someone else's mood. My new apartment settled around me like it had been waiting. Morning light spilled across the kitchen floor. I learned the sound the river made when it was calm and when it wasn't. I cooked meals I liked at times that suited me. I stopped bracing myself before opening my phone. At work, responsibility kept stacking up. People asked my opinion and then actually followed it. I wasn't filling gaps anymore. I wasn't compensating for someone else's chaos. I was allowed to be direct, to be imperfect, to be done at the end of the day without guilt. Daniel and I took things slowly. No fireworks, no performative romance, just consistency. He asked questions and didn't interrupt the answers. He showed up when he said he would. When something bothered him, he said it plainly, instead of turning it into a test I didn't know I was taking. One evening, as we walked along the river, he asked me what had finally made me leave my last relationship. I thought about it for a moment before answering. He asked me to disappear for convenience, I said, and I realized I'd been doing that for years already. Daniel didn't flinch. He didn't ask me to explain more. He just nodded like it made sense. That was when I knew I was done telling the story as something that had happened to me. It was something I had chosen to end. Patrick's name came up less and less until it didn't come up at all. The last I heard, he'd moved cities, started over, or said he was going to. I wished him nothing in particular, not because I was bitter, but because he was no longer a factor in my inner world. One afternoon, I stood in my living room surrounded by boxes. Not because I was leaving, but because I was staying. I had bought the place, signed the papers myself. No shared accounts, no explanations owed. I carried my chipped mug into the kitchen and placed it on the counter of a home that belonged entirely to me. For the first time in my adult life, my future didn't feel like something I had to earn by enduring someone else. It felt like mine by default. I didn't expect to see Patrick again. That's the thing about real closure, it doesn't come with anticipation. There's no emotional drum roll, no lingering sense that something unfinished is waiting around the corner. By the time you're truly done, you've already reorganized your life in a way that doesn't leave space for ghosts. So when I did see him again, it wasn't fate, it was coincidence. It happened at a professional networking event hosted by one of the logistics partners our warehouse worked with. Clean venue, soft lighting, name tags, and polite ambition in the air. Daniel had encouraged me to go, even though he couldn't make it, reminding me gently that my career didn't need to orbit anyone else's schedule anymore. I was mid-conversation with a regional manager when I felt it. That familiar sensation of being watched. Old muscle memory flaring up out of nowhere. I turned. Patrick stood near the back of the room, drink untouched in his hand, staring at me like he'd just walked into the wrong life. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him, but not whole. Thinner. Sharper around the edges. His confidence was assembled, not worn. Something he put on for the evening and would carefully remove later. He hesitated before approaching, and I realized almost with surprise that I wasn't bracing myself. "Martha," he said quietly, "I didn't know you'd be here." "I didn't know you'd be here either," I replied politely. "How are you?" The question landed heavier than it sounded. For a moment, he seemed unsure how to answer it honestly. "I'm working on things," he said. "I moved. New job. New start." "That's good," I said, and meant it in the abstract way you mean things for people who no longer live close to your heart. He glanced around the room, then back at me. "You look grounded," he said. "Happy." "I am," I replied simply. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was informative. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "Not to get you back. I know that ship sailed. Just to say it out loud. I didn't respect you. I built myself on what you provided and resented you for it." There it was, the clearest version of the truth I was ever going to get. "Thank you," I said. "I hope you don't do that to the next person." He nodded, swallowing. "I hope so too." A pause, then softer. "You were the best thing in my life." I met his eyes, not with longing, not with sadness, but with calm. "No," I said gently. "I was the strongest thing in yours. That's different." Someone called my name from across the room. A colleague waving me over, already mid-introduction. I stepped back. "It was good to see you," I said. And it was, in the way it's good to see proof that you survive something without becoming it. I walked away without looking back, not because I was trying to be strong, but because I genuinely didn't need to. Some endings don't feel like endings at all. They feel like alignment. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. Work was still demanding. Some days were long. Some nights were quiet in ways that felt reflective instead of lonely. But the difference was this: I no longer doubted my place in my own life. Daniel and I grew in a way that didn't require constant reassurance. We built something steady, not loud. When we disagreed, we talked. When we needed space, we took it without punishment attached. Love stopped feeling like something I had to earn through tolerance. One evening, months later, I stood on the balcony of my apartment river lights stretching out below me and thought about the woman I'd been in that car, the one who heard the words, "Let me out a block away," and felt her world go cold. I felt tenderness for her. She didn't yell, she didn't beg, she didn't negotiate her worth. She chose clarity. Walking away didn't make me cold, it made me precise. It taught me that love without respect isn't passion, it's erosion. And that the bravest thing a woman can do is stop making herself smaller for someone who benefits from her silence. Somewhere out there, Patrick was living